Good evening, unless it's not. Death comes for us all. It's inevitable. Oh, that must be him now.
You're late. I prefer inevitable. You don't look how I expected. Strict budget.
Huh?
Never mind. What did you think I'd look like?
You know, scary skeleton man, big sight.
Oh yeah, that's me. I'm wearing makeup.
Oh, I see. Thanks for the food.
I'll be back.
What? Why?
Dude, you order like the same thing every day. Enjoy your food.
Thanks, you too. Damn it. See what I mean with that guy? Sheesh. Death is like a transition and a metaphor. This one is really bad. Unlike that transition, though, death is everywhere. It makes sense. Death is something that's ingrained into our thick primate skulls the moment we're born, and there's no shortage of media that are willing to dive right into the grisly topic. Immortality is essentially the #1 movie villain trope at this point. I mean, if you're not sure what your villain wants, obviously they want immortality.
Nice shot!
But immortality is still a few decades off. Before I can spend forever talking about video games, I have to spend about 20 minutes doing it. Lucky for us, death is all over the place, even in video games. I mean, what better way to force emotion into a comedy than to kill off an important character? Or better yet, kill off a character we knew for about 1 hour. Video games have covered a lot of different topics. No, I'm not going to research the first video game that had death. I can confidently tell you it was Pong. But it can be pretty tough to get away with death in a video game. I mean, if you kill off anybody that's important to the story, chances are you're gonna get hate for it. This character was everyone's favorite, this character meant nothing to anybody, this character still hasn't died yet, please make him die. I will write the entire next game for you if you give me the chance. But sometimes death happens in a video game and the player doesn't even really notice. Have you ever thought about the hundreds, if not thousands, of small NPCs that need to be slaughtered for some video games to happen? Developers have to put a lot of time and energy into characters that ultimately mean nothing and will be killed off by the player without batting an eye. MMOs like World of Warcraft do this quite a lot. I mean, it doesn't help that it's been kicking for 20 years, but there are a lot of quests, and that means there's a lot of minor enemies you need to kill. And they always have something to say.
Yeah, take that, fiend!
Just as it was foretold.
Wait, this guy knew you were gonna die and you followed him? And he told you?
I don't know, our leader can see the future or something and he knew this would happen? Ah, shit, I followed the wrong guy, didn't I?
Yeah, you chose the wrong guy.
These quotes are mostly harmless, but after you've heard them 1,000 times, they start to make you wonder a little bit. Like that tropey one, "You're too late." I don't think it's ever been too late. World of Warcraft has had like 15 stories now, and I've never been too late to save the day. Or like when the Murlocs die and they go, gets me every time. But somehow, even with 20 years of history, I'm pretty sure even World of Warcraft can't compete with certain video games. Namely the Warriors franchise. There are a lot of these games, and while each one isn't necessarily as long as a whole MMO, they make you kill off grunts like it's your job. Because it is. These games have you play as a god amongst men, wiping out thousands of people per mission, and I'm pretty sure you're supposed to be representing a whole army, but still, have you seen how many people you kill in these games? I didn't even know there were that many. The joke, as always, is that I have no friends. But thousands of deaths isn't probably the norm in most video games. Sure, a lot of video games have you killing off mindless grunts, but most of the time they really want to focus on that one major character. One death that was always weird to me was,
Don't you dare bring up Ratchet and Clank. Don't do it. Don't you dare bring up Ratchet and Clank.
Captain Quark from Ratchet and Clank 2. No, not only because he's still alive. Having played through this game more times than Bubsy makes puns,
Pilot's license? What for?
the nuances of the storytelling are a little bit lost on me at this point. I already know what's going to happen, so subtle references aren't really subtle anymore, and I'm starting to think they never were. Throughout the game, you get multiple cutscenes, which are basically this news show program that's following the disappearance of Captain Quark. It didn't raise any flags when I was 12, but for a game to focus this much on a character who's not in the story, he's probably in the story. So naturally, the plot twist comes at the end, and you're like, who else would it be? Which gets me thinking about fake-out death. Fake-outs are a pretty cheap way to play with audience expectations. I mean, it was cool like one time. For the few years we thought the Bubsy franchise was dead. These are definitely more common in movies, because they like to do fake-out deaths with the main character, and it'd be pretty hard to pull a fake-out death on the main character in a video game. Oh no, I have died and therefore cannot play the game anymore. Luckily, the video game medium isn't as plagued by fake-out deaths, which means they get to be fun sometimes. You'd think in a game called Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, it'd be really hard to pull off any sort of fake-out death, especially when the entire game revolves around you killing bosses multiple times because they have multiple health bars. But FromSoft doesn't care. They've never cared. About anything. Especially not about you. They will give you the most satisfying kill after the most grueling boss fight, and then say, well, his head is off, but that doesn't mean he's dead. This is probably still one of my favorite moments in gaming, and it was even spoiled for me ahead of time. It wasn't really cinematic, of course, but it's one of those things that FromSoft does where they really fine-tune the player experience. If only they made a more popular video game that I could talk about. But fake-out deaths are too easy to see coming most of the time. Of course, unless you're most of the internet when the Cuphead DLC came out. Most of the time, death exists just to remind us that it's there. Existentialism be damned, you're gonna cry a bit. And I love a well-done, powerful death scene in a video game. Most video games are a little bit too afraid to deal with death correctly, so they either have too many deaths and it doesn't really matter to you anymore, or they don't kill anybody because they're afraid you might have liked that character. But because video games are different from movies and you have that direct control, you feel a little bit more invested in the story, which means it's easier to make a death that is hugely impactful on the player. I'm sure we all remember our first time playing Final Fantasy VII. I was 22 and got bored halfway through, but I'm sure that major death was really sad. Square Enix is weird, because on one hand, they have one of the most memorable, powerful deaths in all of gaming history, and on the other, they have one of the worst fake-outs. Like, yeah, Goofy is totally dead, you got me. One of the strangest moments in Kingdom Hearts for me, which is already a strange franchise, I'm sure you know, is when a rock falls on Goofy and they're like, oh yeah, he's dead. He just shows up again later and everybody's happy and it's like nothing happened, but like, why? And then they did the same thing with Donald in Kingdom Hearts 3, but he actually died, I think. But as characters remind us that we are only mortal, so too do the games themselves. Have you ever been so in love with a franchise only to find out that the company loves money more than you? Well, shit, it must be Tuesday. Yeah, unfortunately, money is the main driving factor for video games, which means if it's not making money, it probably won't make a sequel either. I'll never forget you, right, Analog Stick? But more importantly, money can really influence developers to just make the absolute wrong decisions with a video game. Between budget restrictions and deadlines, or even just them trying to appeal to a wider audience, sometimes they just end up taking the game away from the design that was originally meant for it. I could cite Ratchet and Clank All for One, but my fanbase is about to explode if I mention that game franchise one more time. So instead, Banjo-3. Banjo-Kazooie is probably one of the most popular dead game franchises of all time. It got a proper sequel with Banjo-Tooie, and then all hell broke loose. I don't even have to analyze it myself or anything. The characters in the game talk about how they were trying to appeal to a wider audience. I think one thing that myself and most people want is a true successor to Banjo-Tooie. How dare you? At least it's not nuts and bolts. If there's one thing a dying game needs, it's a ghost. Franchises don't always continue, licenses get muddled, the money might not be there, but as soon as a game becomes nostalgic, that's the perfect time for somebody else to bust out a spiritual successor. Ukulele is the bane of my existence, so instead I'll use Castlevania and Bloodstained as an example. The first Bloodstained game was pretty neat because it was a throwback to the original Castlevania games on NES and SNES. But what's even cooler is when they made a second game, Ritual of the Night, they decided to make it a throwback to the Metroidvania style of games, like Symphony of the Night on PS2. They did a really good job hiding that one. In rare cases, I feel like these spiritual successors even motivate people to make actual revivals for these franchises. Like when Mighty No. 9 was so bad that they had no choice but to make Mega Man 11. And now you have exactly one thing to thank Mighty No. 9 for. Character deaths, fake deaths, death quotes, franchise deaths. Video games are just perfect to talk about for the spooky season, huh? And these are all wonderful topics that could and probably will get a video essay of their own, but Death is a busy man. We have a date.
You ready? I figured we could watch that movie till death.
Nice shot!